Hello and welcome to the WAFB First Alert Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Jared Silverman at your service, and welcome to another edition of This Week in All Things Climate and Weather. And what better place to talk about than the rain, because we've had so much of it lately. It begs the question, why so much rain? So let's first talk about just how much rain we've seen across the region. And by the way, on the AccuWeather.com map, it's not just our area, but even Houston, Galveston, this is Victoria, Texas, they're along the coastline as well, and they were number one. This was the absolute wettest May that they had on record. Their records go back to 1947. Our records go back to the late 1800s. Lake Charles, Louisiana, we know our friends and neighbors in Lake Charles haven't really been able to catch a break over the past few weeks or even over the past few months based on that last season's hurricane season. They were in the top three. They were number 3 in the all-time wettest months of May, and their records go back to 1895. Closer to home in Baton Rouge, we were number 3, not just for the month of May, but we were number 3 for the all-time wettest springs, March plus April plus May, what we consider to be meteorological spring. And in fact, we were only 0.2 of an inch away, which is barely any rain, from being in the top 2 all time. So, in talking about why so much rain, the best place to start is to talk about all the ingredients that you need in order to get showers and thunderstorms. And there are 3 main ingredients that a meteorologist will tell you that you need to have in place. Number 1 is a lifting mechanism, something to trigger the air to rise. It's not just going to happen by its own, but it will happen if you have the right scenario. The second thing you need is ample moisture. We know that moisture equals energy. If you don't have any moisture, you don't have any energy to feed the system, and even if you have an area of low pressure, you're not going to get a lot of rain. So moisture is a very big key in the whole equation. And then third, you need instability. To have an unstable atmosphere is going to continue to make that air buoyant, and it's going to continue to rise, and you need some kind of low altitude convergence where the air comes together. So let's talk about the examples. The example of a lifting mechanism is any kind of front. Cold front, warm front, stationary front, occluded front, any kind of boundary. That's a line that's going to separate 2 air masses that have some kind of different characteristics. One might be colder than the other, one might be a lot more moist than the other, kind of like a dry line in Texas that separates tropical moist air ahead of it from desert dry air behind it. And any time that you've got that front or boundary, that gives you the lifting mechanism. The way we were taught about it in school when we went to class for meteorology, they called it the old blueberry pie model. If you were to take a blueberry pie and clap it together real quickly, all that blueberry filling would go where? It wouldn't go out, it would actually go up. It would shoot up. And that's exactly what happens in the atmosphere. The air comes together or converges at the low levels, and then the air starts to lift. Ample moisture, an example of that, well, that's Louisiana. We've got our name written all over that. Moisture supply, moistures are us, and that's the Gulf of Mexico. And then convergence and divergence. You want 2 things. Lower in the atmosphere on the surface, you want the air to be coming together so you can get that lift. And then higher up in the atmosphere, you want divergence. That means the air is going to move away from each other. So it's kind of an opposite from the low altitude, higher up in the atmosphere. So let's look at a typical scenario here. Why have we been seeing so much rain right here in Louisiana? What has been the deal? The whole month of May, now we're in June and we're still wet. What we've been having is areas where a front gets hung up. That becomes a stationary front, or as we call a stalled out front. So you tend to get that area of high pressure out to the east, and the flow is clockwise. So you bring all this Gulf moisture. Yes, high pressure is usually associated with nice dry weather, but when high pressure is out to the southeastern United States, for Louisiana, it could actually mean more wet weather as you bring in all that Gulf moisture. Now, you've got that stalled out front that's sitting right on top of you, and it kind of gets wedged in there. So it is no place to go. So as long as that boundary is there, you have the ingredients you need. You've got the moisture coming off the Gulf, you've got your instability, and now you've got your lifting mechanism right here along that front. So until that front either completely weakens or dissolves or gets out of here altogether, the rain chances stay in because we still have all the ingredients that we need. And you have that area of low pressure out to the west. That could also enhance the area of lift. So the end result is multiple rounds of showers and thunderstorms. Now, why does this tend to happen around the month of May and June? Well, what starts to happen over here, remember, in the wintertime, cold fronts, they don't stall out. They just clear right on through. So you get the rain in, you get get the rain out. But in May and June, that's when fronts start to stall out down here. That's not going to continue to be the case. Once we get later into the summertime, we're going to see less fronts altogether, and then the only thing we'll have to worry about from that point on, of course, is the upcoming hurricane season, which has already begun. So on the AccuWeather map, you see that big tongue of moisture, and this is the way it looks, where the entire state of Louisiana and the eastern half of Texas gets inundated by rain because they have this constant feed of tropical moisture, and that gives you that threat for persistent and continued flooding, which is going to be the deal over the next week. We still have rain chances for the next several days, and you can see also that deep green indicating areas where they can get locally heavy downpours of 8, 10, even 12 inches of rain, and it's between Houston and southern Louisiana where the climate is different. It's basically our own separate climate zone, which is a tropical climate. It's very similar to what you get in the rainforest. Now watch the difference here between the eastern half of the United States and the western half of the United States. The western half, they have been moisture starved, they haven't had an active weather pattern, and the end result is not good. They have had extreme, even exceptional drought. Now they tend to get that, but not this early in the year, which does not bode well for the wildfire season out there. This summer could be a very long summer, especially when the Santa Ana winds get cranking up on places like California. But again, back over here, as long as we've had this persistent area of high pressure out to the southeast, and sometimes it's out over in Bermuda, what we call Bermuda High, that continues to wrap moisture our way. Not just moisture, but this tends to be a big steering current when we get in the hurricane season. This area of high pressure is the big steering force in where those tropical storms and hurricanes are going to go, where they're going to go, where they're going to make landfall. So when you have high pressure set up in this area, anything that forms in the Gulf is going to follow that same path. Hopefully Louisiana won't have to deal with the 5 or 6 named storms making landfall like we did last year. And we remind you, turn around, don't drown. It's important to bring this up. We had really bad flooding just a few weeks ago. Reminder that 1 foot of water can displace 1,500 pounds, creating buoyancy. That means basically you'll be swept off your feet, you'll be floating. 1 foot of water picks up cars, 2 feet of water picks up trucks and SUVs, and that's the problem. We have a lot of people that drive trucks and SUVs here, and they figure, well, they got 4-wheel drive, they can handle it. Not so. 1 foot of water has 500 pounds of lateral side-to-side force. That's very impressive, and 6 inches of moving water can completely sweep you off your feet. So a good rule of thumb, we say turn around, don't drown. Good rule of thumb, if you're looking at a big puddle and you can see the road and you can see that it's not that high up, you can probably drive through it. But if you see that big puddle and you cannot see the road, you can't see the blacktop, you can't see any of the street lines or anything, it's better to just turn around because you might not be able to make it through. So again, recapping, the main ingredients that you need to get showers and thunderstorms are 3 things. 1, something that causes the air to lift. That's your front, that's your boundary. Number 2, ample moisture. We've got that coming off of the Gulf, but you can get it coming off of any area of water. In the Great Lakes, they get some moisture over there. That's why they get lake effect snow up in the Great Lakes. On the Pacific coast, it's the Pacific Ocean. On the East Coast, it's the Atlantic. But for us here, of course, it is always the Gulf of Mexico. And then that third ingredient, instability. When the air comes together in the low altitudes and then diverges. Again, always think of that blueberry pie model. You got that beautiful blueberry pie, you clap your hands together and you squish that pie, the blueberry filling is going to shoot up. The air does exactly the same thing in the atmosphere. We, unfortunately, will have these ingredients in place for the foreseeable future, which means the rain chances will also stay for the foreseeable future. Well, hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you've got that rain gear handy still. From the WAFB First Alert Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jared Silverman. Take care. Till next time.
Thank you for checking out the WAFB YouTube channel. Subscribe now for more videos and live event coverage. And don't forget to download the WAFB News app on your phone for the local news and information you can depend on.